The scorching California sun beat down on the auction platform as Sarah Cooper's heart hammered in her chest. Paso Robles, 1876, a place where fortunes were made and lost on the turn of a card, the pull of a trigger, or the swing of an auctioneer's gavel. Today, it was her life on the block. "Next up, gentlemen," bellowed Jeremiah Tate, the town's renowned auctioneer, his red suspenders straining against his substantial belly. A woman of 24 years, brought west as a mail-order bride but returned unwanted. The crowd of men stirred, tobacco smoke swirling in the afternoon heat. Sarah stood with her head bowed, auburn hair falling forward to hide the scar that ran from her temple to her jaw. Her hands were bound loosely before her, not because she might run, but as a symbol of her status as property. "She can cook, clean, and tends to horses better than most stable hands," Tate continued, circling her like a vulture. "Been educated back east too, reads and writes with fine penmanship." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "What's wrong with her face?" called a voice from the back. Tate reached out and roughly pushed Sarah's hair back, exposing the jagged scar that had been inflicted during a stagecoach robbery that had claimed her parents' lives 3 years earlier. "Got herself marked up in a robbery. And that's not all." Tate's voice dropped conspiratorially. "The man who paid for her passage sent her back. Says she's barren." He laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that cut through the dusty air. "She's damaged goods, gentlemen, but priced accordingly. Shall we start the bidding at $20? Sarah closed her eyes, shame burning hotter than the sun overhead. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a hopeful bride. Now she was being sold to pay for her return passage and the debt of her failed marriage to a man who'd wanted her only for children she couldn't provide. "I'll give you 50. The voice that cut through the crowd was deep, steady as bedrock. Sarah's eyes snapped open, searching for its owner. He stood at the edge of the gathering, tall and straight-backed. Dust covered his clothes, but even caked in the grime of the trail, there was something undeniably striking about him. His dark hat was pulled low, shadowing eyes that seemed to burn right through her. 50, Tate repeated, eyebrows climbing toward his receding hairline. "For damaged goods." The stranger stepped forward, boots heavy on the wooden platform. Up close, Sarah could see his face clearly tanned by the sun, a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Then I'll take what's broken and heal it," the stranger said, his gaze never leaving Sarah's. $50, cash." A hush fell over the crowd. "Going once," Tate said, confusion evident in his voice. "Going twice." 60, called another voice belonging to Abe Matthews, the owner of the largest cattle operation in the county, a man known for his cruelty to both animals and people. The stranger turned slowly, assessing Matthews with a cool gaze. 75. 80, Matthews countered, spitting tobacco juice at the stranger's boots. 100, the stranger said, reaching into his vest and pulling out a leather pouch that jingled with the unmistakable sound of gold coins. The crowd murmured. $100 was a month's wages for most men. Matthews opened his mouth, then closed it, a calculating look in his eye. "She ain't worth it," he finally said with a dismissive wave. "Sold." Tate's gavel came down with finality. "To the gentleman for $100. Only then did the stranger look at Sarah fully. "Name's Samuel Nichols," he said quietly as he paid Tate and received the paper declaring her debt settled. "I've got a small ranch 10 miles north of town. You'll have your own room, your own wages, and you're free to leave whenever you choose." Sarah stared at him, searching for the lie in his words. Men didn't pay $100 for a woman's freedom. "Why?" she whispered. Samuel's weathered face softened slightly. "Because nobody deserves to be auctioned like cattle." He reached out, hesitated, then gently removed the bindings from her wrists. And because I know something about being broken myself. The crowd began to disperse, disappointed by the anticlimactic end to the auction. Samuel offered his arm. "My wagon's this way, miss." "Cooper," she said, finding her voice. "Sarah Cooper." "Miss Cooper," he nodded respectfully. "I imagine you'd like to leave this town behind as soon as possible." Sarah glanced back at the auction platform, the place where her dignity had been stripped away piece by piece. Then she looked at the strange cowboy who'd just spent a small fortune to rescue her. "Yes," she said firmly, taking his offered arm. "I believe I would." Samuel Nichols' wagon was modest but well-maintained, pulled by 2 sturdy quarter horses. He helped Sarah onto the seat, then climbed up beside her, careful to leave space between them. "I have some water and bread if you're hungry," he offered, not looking at her as he set the team in motion. "Thank you," Sarah said, accepting the canteen he passed her. The water was cool, and she realized how parched her throat had become from standing in the auction yard. "Mr. Nichols, I feel I should tell you what the auctioneer said about me. It's true." Samuel kept his eyes on the road. "Which part?" "I'm scarred, and I can't bear children. My former husband, he had me examined by a doctor in Sacramento before sending me back." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. "I didn't buy you to bear my children, Miss Cooper." His voice was matter-of-fact. "I need help with my ranch. It's not much, 80 acres, 25 head of cattle, some chickens, and 2 ornery goats. The previous housekeeper left to marry a man in Oregon. You'll earn your keep and fair wages besides." Sarah studied his profile, searching for hidden intentions. "And when will you expect me to?" "Share your bed." Samuel's knuckles whitened on the reins. "Never," he said firmly. "That's not why I brought you with me. You'll have your own room with a lock on the door. I don't force myself on women, Miss Cooper. Never have, never will." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking beneath them as they left the town of Paso Robles behind. The landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with oak trees. In the distance, Sarah could see mountains rising blue against the sky. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Samuel agreed. "I came from Missouri after the war, wanted somewhere peaceful." Sarah glanced at him. "You fought Union cavalry," he said simply. "Seemed like the right thing at the time." A question formed on her lips, but she held it back. His business was his own, just as hers was. She'd learned the hard way that men didn't appreciate curious women. As if sensing her thoughts, Samuel said, "You can ask whatever you want, Miss Cooper. I might not answer, but I won't hold the asking against you." Sarah hesitated. "Why did you really buy my contract?" $100 is a lot of money." Samuel was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed. 6 years ago, my sister was left widowed after her husband was killed in a mining accident. She ended up in a situation not unlike yours." His jaw tightened. "I was too far away to help her then. By the time I found her, she'd already—" He cleared his throat. "I couldn't help her, but I could help you." Sarah's throat constricted. "I'm sorry about your sister." "Me too," he said quietly. Then, in a deliberate change of subject, he pointed ahead. "That's Grizzly Ridge. My land starts at the base and runs eastward to the creek." The ranch came into view as they crested a small hill. It wasn't grand, but Sarah could see it had been built with care. The main house was a solid structure of timber and stone, with a broad porch across the front. A barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and several smaller outbuildings. A corral held 3 horses that raised their heads at the approaching wagon. "It's not much," Samuel said, almost apologetically, "but it's peaceful." "It looks lovely," Sarah said honestly. After weeks of uncertainty, the sight of the snug house was welcoming. He pulled the wagon to a stop and came around to help her down. His hands were strong but gentle on her waist, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. "I'll show you to your room," he said, grabbing her small bag from the back of the wagon. "You must be tired." The interior of the house was simple but clean. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace along one wall. Samuel led her down a short hallway to a bedroom at the back of the house. "This is yours," he said, pushing the door open. "Mine's across the hall. There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. I'll start supper." The room was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table beside the window. True to his word, there was a sturdy lock on the door. "Thank you, Mr. Nichols," Sarah said, standing awkwardly in the center of the room. Samuel nodded once, then hesitated at the door. "Miss Cooper, I want you to understand something. You're not my property. Your debt is paid and you're free to stay or go as you please. If you choose to work here, I'll pay you fair wages, $15 a month plus room and board. If you choose to leave, I'll take you wherever you want to go." Sarah stared at him, searching for the catch in his words. Finding none, she simply nodded. "I understand." "Good." He started to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. What happened to your face doesn't make you damaged, Miss Cooper. Scars are just proof we survived something that tried to kill us." With that, he closed the door, leaving Sarah alone with thoughts as tangled as bramble vines. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling slightly. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't being leered at, judged, or treated as merchandise. She touched the scar on her face, the physical reminder of the day her life had changed forever. The stagecoach robbery had taken her parents and left her marked, but it was the cruelty of her brief husband that had truly wounded her spirit. Yet here, in this stranger's home, she felt the faintest stirring of hope. Like the first tender shoot pushing through scorched earth after a wildfire. She wasn't foolish enough to trust it entirely, not yet. But for tonight, at least, she was safe. And tomorrow would bring what it would. That night, Sarah slept deeply for the first time in months, lulled by the unfamiliar silence of the countryside, and the knowledge that her door was firmly locked not to keep her in, but to keep others out. Morning came with the crowing of roosters and the smell of coffee. Sarah dressed quickly in her one spare dress, faded blue calico that had seen better days. She'd need to see about making new clothing if she stayed, but that was a concern for another day. When she entered the kitchen, Samuel was already there, frying bacon in a cast iron skillet. He glanced up as she entered. "Morning," he said. "Coffee's hot if you want some." "Thank you." Sarah poured herself a cup, noting how the kitchen was well organized but clearly lacking a woman's touch. "May I help with breakfast, if you'd like? There are eggs in the basket by the door." Chickens were generous this morning. They worked in companionable silence, moving around each other with careful politeness. It was strange, Sarah thought, how quickly one could adapt to new circumstances when necessary. Over breakfast, Samuel outlined her duties. The house needs attention: cleaning, cooking, mending. Outside, the chickens need tending and the vegetable garden's been neglected. I've got a mare about to foal, so I'll be busy with the herd for the next few days. You won't see much of me except at meals. I understand, Sarah said, already mentally cataloging the tasks before her. Town's 10 miles south, as you know. I go in for supplies twice a month. If you need anything particular, make a list. I will. She hesitated. Mr. Nichols, about my wages. First month paid in advance, he said, reaching into his pocket and placing 3 $5 gold pieces on the table. For anything you might need. The rest will come at month's end. Sarah stared at the money more than she'd held at one time in months. Thank you. Samuel nodded, finished his coffee, and stood. I'll be in the north pasture if you need anything urgent." He paused at the door. "The house is yours to order as you see fit, Miss Cooper. I'm not particular about much, except I like my coffee strong and dinner on the table by sundown." With that, he was gone, leaving Sarah alone in the quiet house. She spent that first day taking stock of her new domain. The house was solidly built but needed a woman's touch. Dust had accumulated on shelves, the windows needed washing, and the pantry required organization. But the bones of the place were good, and she could see that Samuel took pride in his home. In the late afternoon, Sarah ventured outside to gather eggs and inspect the garden. The vegetable patch was overgrown but salvageable. Tomatoes hung heavy on neglected vines, and beans needed picking. She was on her knees, pulling weeds, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Samuel rode into the yard on a sleek black gelding, his face grim. Behind him, he led a horse with something large draped over its back, a deer, Sarah realized. "Good hunting." She called, standing and brushing dirt from her skirt. "Not hunting," he replied, dismounting. "Poachers. They killed this buck on my land and ran when they saw me coming." Sarah approached as he began unloading the deer. "Can I help?" He gave her a surprised look. "You know how to dress a deer." "My father taught me," she said simply. "We lived in Colorado before coming west. He believed a woman should know how to fend for herself." A flicker of respect crossed Samuel's face. "Smart man, your father." Together they worked to hang and dress the deer, an unexpected intimacy developing in the shared task. Samuel's hands were sure and efficient, and he didn't question Sarah's competence or express shock at her willingness to get her hands bloody. "Waste of a good animal," he said as they worked. "Buck this size would have sired strong fawns next season." "At least the meat won't go to waste now," Sarah observed. Samuel nodded. "We'll smoke most of it. Some can go to the Wilsons' family down the road with 5 children and a father laid up with a broken leg." The simple kindness of the gesture touched Sarah. This man, who had already shown more generosity than anyone she'd met in years, thought nothing of sharing his bounty with neighbors in need. As the sun began to set, painting the hills in gold and crimson, they finished their task. Sarah's dress was stained with blood and dirt, and her hands were raw from work. "You should rest," Samuel said as they washed up at the pump. "I can see to dinner tonight." "Nonsense," Sarah replied. "I've got stew ready to heat. It just needs serving." His mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You work fast, Miss Cooper." "Sarah," she said impulsively, "if we're to work together, you might as well use my given name." He considered this, then nodded. "Sarah, then, and I'm Samuel to you." That night, they ate venison stew by lamplight, the silence between them more comfortable than it had been that morning. Outside, coyotes called to one another across the hills, and somewhere an owl hooted softly. "Tomorrow I'll show you the rest of the ranch," Samuel said as he helped her clear the dishes. "You should know the boundaries if you're going to be living here." "I'd like that," Sarah replied, and was surprised to realize she meant it. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Sarah took charge of the house, transforming it from a bachelor's quarters into a proper home. She scoured and polished, mended curtains, and brought order to chaos. The vegetable garden flourished under her attention, and the chickens began laying more consistently. True to his word, Samuel showed her the boundaries of his land, 80 acres of rolling hills, meadows, and oak groves, with a clear creek running through the eastern section. He pointed out landmarks and potential dangers, treating her neither as a helpless female nor as an intruder, but as a partner in the running of his land. "How did you come to own such a beautiful place?" Sarah asked as they paused atop a ridge overlooking the property. Samuel was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Won it in a card game," he finally said. Original owner was a Confederate colonel who didn't know when to fold. He bet the deed against my last $50. A wry smile touched his lips. Only lucky hand I ever had. Do you regret it? Coming here, he considered the question. No, Missouri held too many ghosts after the war. Here, a man can breathe. Sarah understood. Her own past felt distant here, the painful memories less immediate with each passing day. As weeks turned into a month, Sarah found herself watching Samuel when he didn't notice. The way his strong hands gentled when handling a new foal. How the perpetual furrow between his brows smoothed when he thought no one was looking. The rare smile that transformed his stern face into something almost boyish. She caught him watching her too, sometimes a quick glance away when she turned, a lingering look across the dinner table. But he never overstepped, never made her feel unsafe. Each night she locked her door, and each morning she found him already at work, respectful of the boundaries between them. It was nearly 6 weeks after her arrival when trouble came to the Nichols ranch. Sarah was hanging laundry in the yard when 3 riders approached. She recognized the center man immediately, Abe Matthews, the cattle baron who had bid against Samuel at the auction. His reputation in the area was fearsome. He was known for expanding his holdings by any means necessary, legal or otherwise. "Good day, madam," Matthews called, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "Is Nichols about?" "Mr. Nichols is working with the cattle," Sarah replied, keeping her voice even despite the unease crawling up her spine. "I can tell him you called." Matthews dismounted, his boots raising dust as he approached her. He was a tall man with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Well, if it isn't the damaged goods, seems Nichols got himself a bargain after all." Sarah stiffened but held her ground. "Mr. Nichols isn't here." "I suggest you return another time." Matthews circled her slowly like a predator assessing prey. "Tell me, girl, has he tired of you yet? When he does, my offer still stands. I could use a new cook at the main house." "That's enough, Matthews." Samuel's voice cut through the tension as he rode into the yard, rifle balanced across his saddle. "State your business or leave my property." Matthews turned with exaggerated slowness. "Just being neighborly, Nichols, checking to see if you've reconsidered my offer for this land." "My answer's the same as it was last month and the month before that. This land isn't for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price," Matthews replied. "You're sitting on the best water source in the county and my herd needs expanding. $5,000, that's more than fair." "Not interested," Samuel said flatly. Matthews' smile tightened. "You should reconsider. Small ranchers like you are having. Accidents lately. Fences cut, cattle rustled. Dangerous times." "Is that a threat?" Samuel's hand moved imperceptibly closer to his rifle. "Just an observation." Matthews returned to his horse and mounted with fluid ease. "Think about it, Nichols. $5,000 buys a lot of new beginnings." His gaze shifted to Sarah, lingering on her scar. "Maybe even a prettier housekeeper." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, Samuel had dismounted and crossed the yard in long strides, his face thunderous. "Get off my land," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And if I ever hear you speak to Miss Cooper like that again, you'll be eating your meals through a straw for a month." For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Matthews laughed, a sound without humor. "Big talk for a man on borrowed time." He turned his horse. "5,000. Offer expires in 1 week." They watched in silence as the 3 riders disappeared down the road. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked once they were gone, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Yes," Sarah said, though her hands trembled slightly as she returned to the laundry. "Does he make that offer often? Every month since spring?" Samuel ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing in disarray. He wants the creek that runs through the eastern section. It's the only year-round water source that doesn't cross his land. Will he really cause trouble? Samuel's expression darkened. Matthews doesn't make idle threats. Wilson's place had a mysterious fire last month after he refused to sell, and the Hansons lost half their cattle to rustlers that no one could identify. Fear clutched at Sarah's heart. What will you do? What I've always done, Samuel replied, his jaw set in a stubborn line. Stand my ground. That evening, Sarah couldn't focus on her mending. The encounter with Matthews had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Not just his threats against the ranch, but the way he'd looked at her as if she were merely a flawed possession to be traded or discarded. You're thinking too hard, Samuel observed from where he sat cleaning his rifle at the table. I can hear the gears turning from here. Despite her worry, Sarah smiled, just wondering what sort of accidents Matthews might have planned. Nothing we can't handle, Samuel replied, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his concern. He hesitated, then added, if you're worried for your safety, I'd understand if you wanted to go to town for a while. The hotels, I'm not leaving, Sarah interrupted firmly. This is my home too now. The words hung in the air between them, a declaration neither had expected. Samuel looked up, his hand stilling on the rifle. Is it? He asked quietly. Your home, Sarah met his gaze steadily. Yes, unless you'd prefer I go. No, he said, the word coming quickly. I don't want that. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily since her arrival. Sarah found herself unable to look away from his intense gaze. The moment was broken by a sound outside the distant crack of a rifle shot. Samuel was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. Stay here, he ordered, grabbing his gun and hat. What is it? Sarah asked, fear tightening her chest. Could be nothing. Could be Matthews making good on his threats. He checked his ammunition with practiced movements. Bar the door behind me and keep the shotgun close. Before Sarah could protest, he was gone, slipping into the gathering darkness. She barred the door as instructed, then took down the shotgun Samuel kept loaded above the mantel. The weight of it was familiar in her hands, another skill her father had insisted she learn. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah moved from window to window, straining to see in the moonlight, jumping at every sound. When another shot echoed in the distance, followed by the frightened lowing of cattle, her heart seemed to stop. Samuel had been gone nearly an hour when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Positioning herself beside the window, shotgun ready, she peered cautiously into the darkness. Relief flooded her when she recognized Samuel's black gelding, but it was short-lived. Even in the dim light, she could see he was slumped in the saddle, one arm hanging limp at his side. Sarah flung open the door and ran to meet him as he barely managed to dismount. What happened? She gasped, seeing the dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. Matthew's men, he grunted as she helped him toward the house. Shooting cattle, caught one of them, but his partner winged me before they rode off. Inside, she helped him to a chair and quickly lit more lamps. The bullet had torn through the muscle of his upper arm, painful but not life-threatening if infection could be prevented. We need to clean it, Sarah said, already gathering supplies. This will hurt. Samuel managed a tight smile. Not my first bullet wound. As she worked to clean and bandage his arm, Sarah's hands remained steady despite the fear churning inside her. We should send for the sheriff, she said, and tell him what? That men I didn't recognize shot at me in the dark. Samuel shook his head. Matthews is too clever to leave evidence. He's friends with Judge Parker, too. So we just wait for him to try again, Sarah asked, tying off the bandage with perhaps more force than necessary. Samuel caught her wrist, his fingers warm against her skin. "We prepare," he said simply. Over the next days they did just that. Samuel, despite his injured arm, reinforced doors and windows. Sarah kept the shotgun within reach as she went about her chores, eyes constantly scanning the horizon for approaching riders. They brought the most valuable cattle closer to the house and took turns standing watch at night. It was exhausting, living under the shadow of threat, but there was an unexpected silver lining. The shared danger had broken down the remaining barriers between them. They worked together seamlessly now, anticipating each other's needs, communicating sometimes without words. And in the quiet moments they talked, really talked. Samuel told her about the war, about the nightmares that still sometimes woke him in the darkness. Sarah spoke of her parents, of the life she'd had before the stagecoach robbery, and even, haltingly, of her brief, painful marriage. "He wanted sons," she explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills. "When the doctor in Sacramento confirmed I couldn't have children, he changed, said I'd tricked him, that I was worthless as a wife." Samuel's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. "He was a fool," he said quietly. Sarah glanced at him, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. "A woman's worth isn't measured by her ability to bear children," he continued, meeting her gaze. "It's in her courage, her kindness, her strength." He hesitated, then added softly, "You're the strongest person I know, Sarah Cooper." Something warm unfurled in her chest at his words. She looked away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze, but her hand found his in the gathering darkness. His fingers closed around hers, calloused but gentle. They sat like that until the stars emerged, neither speaking, neither needing to. 3 days later, Matthews made his move. It came at dawn, the time when the night watch might be growing drowsy and the day's workers not yet fully alert. Sarah was in the kitchen, starting the morning coffee, when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of multiple riders approaching from the east. She moved to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. What she saw made her blood run cold. At least 8 men, all armed, spreading out to surround the house and barn. Matthews rode at their center, a rifle resting across his saddle horn. "Samuel," she called urgently. He appeared from the bedroom, buckling on his gun belt, already alert to the danger. "How many?" "8 that I can see." "Matthews is with them." Samuel nodded grimly. "Get the rifles ready. And Sarah," he caught her arm as she moved past him, "if things go badly, there's a hidden compartment under the floorboards in my room. Has money, deed to the ranch, and papers for the horses. You take it and ride for Sacramento. My brother Benjamin's address is in there too." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah said fiercely. Before he could respond, Matthew's voice boomed from outside. "Nichols, come out and talk." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Stay back from the windows," he murmured, moving to the front door. He opened it partway, keeping his body shielded by the thick wood. "What do you want, Matthews?" "Just a friendly visit," Matthews called back, his voice carrying easily in the morning stillness. "Though I notice you seem a bit nervous. All these locked doors and reinforced windows. Almost like you're expecting trouble." "Can't be too careful with rustlers about," Samuel replied evenly. Matthews laughed. "Rustlers indeed. I've come with a final offer, Nichols. 6,000 for the ranch, lock, stock, and barrel. You and your housekeeper can be on the next stage out of Paso Robles with enough money to start fresh anywhere you like." Sarah watched the muscles in Samuel's back tense beneath his shirt. "And if I refuse?" "Then things get unpleasant," Matthews said, his jovial tone dropping to something colder. "I've got papers here, signed by Judge Parker, authorizing seizure of this property for unpaid taxes." "That's a lie," Samuel growled. "My taxes are paid in full." Records can be so easily misplaced, Matthews said with mock sympathy. So here's how it's going to be. You can take my generous offer, or my men will remove you from what is now legally my property. He paused. I should mention that Judge Parker has authorized us to use whatever force necessary against trespassers. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized the trap Matthews had set. With the judge in his pocket, he'd created a veneer of legality for what was nothing more than armed robbery. "Give me 10 minutes to discuss with Miss Cooper," Samuel called after a moment's consideration. "5," Matthews countered. "I'm a busy man." Samuel closed the door and turned to Sarah, his expression grim. "He's got us cornered legally. If we fight, we'll be branded outlaws. We can't just give him the ranch," Sarah protested. "This is your home, our home." Samuel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I won't risk your life. And I won't watch you lose everything you've built." Sarah's mind raced. There had to be a solution, some way out that didn't involve bloodshed or surrender. Suddenly, she remembered something. "Samuel, the deed to the ranch, does it specify the exact boundaries?" He frowned. "Yes, by landmarks mostly. The ridge to the north, the big oak stand to the west, the creek to the east, and the county road to the south." "Why the creek?" Sarah said urgently. "Matthews wants the water rights, but what if the creek isn't actually on your property?" Understanding dawned in Samuel's eyes. "The original survey was done in '65, right after I won the place. The creek has shifted its course since then. Spring floods cut a new channel further east. So technically, the water source Matthews wants is no longer on my land," Samuel finished, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It's on the unclaimed government section beyond my eastern boundary. Which means," Sarah continued, excitement building, "that anyone can file a claim on it." "Including us." Samuel stared at her in wonder. "Sarah Cooper, you're a genius." "Time's up, Nichols," Matthews called from outside, impatience clear in his voice. Samuel grabbed Sarah's hand. "Follow my lead," he murmured before opening the door wide and stepping onto the porch, Sarah beside him. Matthews and his men had moved closer, forming a loose semicircle in the yard. All were armed, hands resting on weapons. "Well," Matthews demanded. "I've got a counter-proposal," Samuel said calmly. "You're right about one thing, Matthews' water in this county is valuable. But you've been trying to buy the wrong property." Matthews' eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The creek you want doesn't actually cross my land anymore," Samuel explained. "Spring floods 2 years ago cut a new channel. It's now entirely on the unclaimed section east of my boundary." A murmur ran through Matthews' men. The cattle baron himself looked skeptical. "You expect me to believe that? Believe what you want," Samuel shrugged. "But I've got the original survey and deed in the house. The new channel is at least 50 yards east of my property line." Matthews dismounted slowly, suspicion written across his features. "Show me these documents." "Gladly," Samuel gestured toward the house. "Just you, though. Your men stay outside." After a tense moment of consideration, Matthews nodded sharply. "Hank, Pete, keep an eye on things," he instructed 2 of his men before following Samuel and Sarah inside. The next hour was one of the most tense in Sarah's life. Samuel showed Matthews the original deed and survey maps, carefully explaining the shift in the creek's path. Skeptical at first, the cattle baron became thoughtful as he realized the implication the water he coveted could be his, without paying a cent if he filed a claim before anyone else. "So you're telling me," Matthews said slowly, "that I've been trying to buy your worthless 80 acres when the water's been free for the taking all along?" "Not worthless to me," Samuel replied evenly. "But yes, the creek you want is on public land. For now." The calculation in Matthews' eyes was plain to see. "And why are you telling me this, Nichols?" Out of the goodness of your heart. Because I want you off my back, Samuel said bluntly. You get your water rights, I keep my ranch, and we both go our separate ways. Matthews studied him for a long moment, then let out a bark of laughter. You're either the smartest or the dumbest man I've ever met, Nichols. He rolled up the survey map decisively. I'll need to borrow this to show my surveyor. Bring it back when you're done, Samuel said. And Matthews, once you've filed your claim, our business is concluded, permanently. The cattle baron's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, just business, nothing personal. He tipped his hat to Sarah. Madam. They watched from the porch as Matthews and his men rode away, the tension in the air dissolving gradually with the sound of retreating hoofbeats. Will it work? Sarah asked quietly. It might, Samuel replied, his shoulder brushing against hers. He's greedy enough to believe it, and once he starts the claiming process, he'll be too invested to back out. He glanced down at her, a hint of admiration in his eyes. Quick thinking, Sarah. My father was a surveyor, she explained. I learned a few things about property boundaries and water rights. Samuel's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. I don't know what I'd have done without you here today. The simple touch sent warmth coursing through Sarah's body. She turned to face him fully, finding his gaze already on her. You'd have thought of something, she said softly. You're a survivor, Samuel Nichols. So are you, he replied, his free hand rising hesitantly to her face, fingertips brushing gently over her scar. So are you. The touch was like a key unlocking something within her, something she'd thought broken beyond repair. Sarah leaned into his hand, her eyes never leaving his. Samuel, she whispered, her voice unsteady. He bent toward her slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly at first, a question more than a demand. When Sarah responded, pressing closer, the kiss deepened, becoming an answer neither had dared to hope for. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day you took charge of my kitchen, he confessed. Sarah laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised them both. And I've wanted to let you since the day you showed me how to gentle that wild foal. His arms tightened around her. I'm not good with fancy words, Sarah, but I need you to know what I feel for you isn't gratitude or convenience. It's deeper than that. Stronger. I know, she said simply, because she did. In the weeks they'd spent together, facing danger and building a life, she'd come to understand this quiet, honorable man better than she'd ever understood anyone. I feel it too. They stood together on the porch as the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the land. They'd defended together the home they'd made their own. The next days were filled with a cautious happiness. Matthews hadn't returned, but Samuel rode the boundaries daily, watchful for any sign of trouble. Sarah found herself humming as she worked, the weight that had pressed on her heart for so long beginning to lift. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch, talking of the future in ways they hadn't dared before. Samuel spoke of expanding the herd, perhaps building a larger house one day. Sarah shared her dreams of a proper garden, maybe even a small orchard of apple and pear trees. Neither mentioned children. The subject remained a tender wound for Sarah, one she wasn't yet ready to probe. But one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the hills in gold, Samuel broached a related topic. I've been thinking, he said, his voice careful. There are children in this county who need homes, orphans from the war, from disease, from accidents. Sarah's hand stilled on her mending. What are you saying? Just that family comes in many forms. Samuel's gaze remained on the distant hills. Blood isn't the only thing that makes people belong to each other. Something loosened in Sarah's chest, a knot of grief she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. You'd consider taking in orphans, even though you could marry someone who could give you children of your own. Now Samuel turned to look at her, his expression serious. Sarah, I don't want children with anyone else. I want a life with you, however that life looks. Tears pricked at her eyes. You can't know how much that means to me, she whispered. He reached over, taking her hand. I think I do, he said softly, because meeting you has given me back something I thought was lost forever too. It was in that moment, as the last light faded from the sky, that Sarah knew without doubt that she loved this man not just for saving her from the auction block, but for seeing her value when she'd forgotten it herself. 2 days later, Matthews returned the survey map, accompanied only by his foreman. His manner was brisk, businesslike, all previous threats apparently forgotten. My surveyor confirms your claim about the creek, he told Samuel. I've already started the filing process for the eastern section. Good, Samuel replied neutrally. Then our business is concluded. Matthew's smile was thin. So it seems. Though I do wonder, Nichols, what will you do when that creek shifts again? Nature's unpredictable. I'll manage, Samuel said. Always have. The cattle baron nodded slowly, eyes shifting to Sarah, who stood in the doorway. You've done well for yourself, considering. The damaged goods turned out to be useful after all. Samuel's hand moved to his gun, but Sarah was faster. She stepped forward, chin high. Mr. Matthews, she said calmly, I'd thank you to remember that this damaged goods just outsmarted you and saved both our lives in the process. For a moment, Matthews looked genuinely startled. Then he threw back his head and laughed, a real laugh this time, not the calculating chuckle they'd heard before. By God, Nichols, she's got more spine than half my men. He tipped his hat to Sarah. No offense intended, madam. I recognize quality when I see it. With that unexpected concession, he rode away, leaving Sarah and Samuel staring after him in bemusement. You think it's really over? Sarah asked as the riders disappeared down the road. With Matthews? Never entirely, Samuel replied honestly, but I think we've earned a reprieve. That night, as they prepared for bed, Samuel lingered in the hallway between their rooms. Sarah, he said, his voice unexpectedly hesitant, I've been thinking a great deal about us, about the future. Sarah's heart quickened. Oh, yes, he took a deep breath. I know we haven't known each other long, but I know that you're the woman I want to spend my life with. He reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. In his palm lay a simple gold band with a small pearl set in the center. Samuel, Sarah breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. Are you asking? I'm asking if you'll marry me, Sarah Cooper, he said simply. Not because you need my protection or I need your help with the ranch, but because I love you. I love your courage and your kindness and your quick mind. I love the way you face each day, scarred but undefeated. He took her hand gently. You were never damaged goods, Sarah. You were just waiting for someone who could see your true worth. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Samuel Nichols. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion that had been building between them for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sarah saw in his eyes the same wonder she felt that after so much pain and loss they had found each other. When? She asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. As soon as possible, Samuel replied. The circuit preacher comes through Paso Robles next week. Unless you want to wait for something grander. Sarah shook her head. I don't need grand. I just need you. They were married the following Sunday in the small church in Paso Robles. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by the handful of neighboring ranchers Samuel counted as friends, along with their wives who had quickly taken Sarah under their wing. To Sarah's surprise, even Abe Matthews made an appearance, arriving late and standing at the back of the church. After the ceremony, he approached them with an unexpected wedding gift, the deed to the eastern section he'd filed claim on. "Consider it compensation for past misunderstandings," he said gruffly. "Besides, a man in my position can't afford to be seen feuding with his neighbors. Bad for business." Samuel accepted the deed with a nod, recognizing the gesture for what it was, not just a peace offering, but an acknowledgement of respect. As they drove back to the ranch that evening, husband and wife at last, Sarah leaned against Samuel's shoulder, contentment washing over her like the golden California sunset. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked, his arm warm around her waist. "I'm thinking about the auction block," she replied honestly. "About how the worst day of my life led me to the best." Samuel's arm tightened around her. "I remember looking at you that day, seeing how you held your head high despite everything, and thinking you were the bravest person I'd ever seen." "I wasn't brave," Sarah confessed. "I was terrified. But then you said those words about taking what was broken and healing it, and for the first time in so long I felt hope." "I meant every word," Samuel said softly, "though I didn't know then that you'd end up healing me too." As they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, their home, their future, Sarah felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her bones. The scar on her face would always remain, a reminder of all she had survived. But the wounds to her spirit were healing, growing stronger each day under the careful tending of the man beside her. And in return, she would continue to nurture the tender parts of him that the war had nearly destroyed: his capacity for joy, for trust, for love. Together, they would build something neither had dared hope for, a family in whatever form it took. The wagon rolled to a stop before the house. Samuel turned to her, love clear in his eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Nichols." Sarah smiled, her heart full to bursting. "I've been home since the day you brought me here," she said simply, and knew it for the truth. 10 years later, the Nichols Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the county. The small house had expanded to accommodate not just Samuel and Sarah, but the 3 children they had adopted along the way: Emma, a serious 10-year-old whose parents had died of typhoid; Michael, an 8-year-old with a mischievous smile and a talent for horseback riding; and little Thomas, just 5, rescued from an orphanage in San Francisco. On the anniversary of the day Samuel had brought Sarah home from the auction, they sat together on the enlarged porch, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set behind the hills. "You ever think about how differently our lives might have gone?" Sarah asked, her head resting against her husband's shoulder. Samuel's hand found hers, fingers tracing the simple gold band she'd worn for a decade now. "Sometimes. But then I look at what we've built together, and I can't imagine any other path." Sarah smiled, thinking of the auctioneer's cruel words so long ago. Damaged goods, he'd called her. If only he could see her now, mother to 3 thriving children, respected throughout the county, beloved by the man at her side. "What are you smiling about?" Samuel asked, pressing a kiss to her temple where the scar began its path down her cheek. "Just thinking that sometimes the things others see as broken are actually just waiting for the right hands to reveal their true value," she replied. Samuel nodded, understanding as he always did. "Like that old oak table you rescued from the Wilson's barn sale, the one everyone thought was beyond repair." "Exactly," Sarah laughed. "It just needed someone who could see past the scratches to the solid heart underneath." As darkness fell and the children were called in for supper, Samuel held Sarah back for a moment, his expression suddenly serious. "I've never regretted it, you know," he said quietly. "Not for a single day. Regretted what? Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. Stepping forward that day at the auction, taking a chance on us. His hand cradled her face, thumb gently tracing the scar that had once defined her in the eyes of others. You were never broken, Sarah, just waiting for someone who could see you whole. Sarah rose on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring a decade of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they broke apart, the children were calling impatiently from inside, eager for their parents to join them. Hand in hand, Sarah and Samuel Nichols walked into the warm light of their home, leaving the shadows of the past where they belonged behind them, fading with each step into the future they'd built together.